Hi there, I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and this is the Bonsai Stuff podcast. The podcast about all things bonsai. It's been running for this is its 5th season now. So if you're fresh to the podcast, welcome. If you're coming back because you've listened to me drone on for a while now, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. So this episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast is going to focus on probably a pivotal day in my life when I went to study in Japan. So I'm getting back to the Japan journey trip, the very first trip I did back in 2012. And this is specifically relating to a really interesting time that I had in being involved in the professional side of bonsai, where they were setting up for Kokufu, one of the large Japanese shows and one of the best in the world. And it was mind-blowing. So I want to let you know a bit of background on that, how I got involved and what my experiences were, and hopefully you find it enjoyable. So thanks for listening in. I really appreciate it as always, and let's get into it. So it was day 6 of my trip, my first trip it's actually the start of February in 2012. And we were around the nursery and we had to load up the van to take stock trees to go to from Aichien in Nagoya to Daijuen, which is another major nursery over there, which is related to sort of Aichien where I stayed. And it's where all different nurseries came together to load the vans to head on up to Tokyo to drop off for the sales area at the Green Club, as well as for the setup of the show. So this day we loaded up. We had one tree on display at Kokufu from Aichien, beautiful jasmine, semi-cascade, and there was other trees for sale as well. And we drove about 40 minutes to take these 13 odd trees, I think it was, and a heap of stuff for the sales area, displays, rocks, whatever it was. And it was incredible. So we tore off to Daijuen, get there, and there was a heap of trees there and big vans specifically set up just for carting bonsai around that I'd never seen before, that were getting loaded up with all these trees, and they were important trees. So they were tagged and registered as important trees, and had previously won the top awards at the Kokufu show. And we basically just hustled and bustled and used as labour, I suppose, to cart all these things and put them into the vans and get everything ready to go. So that was basically most of that day. And we headed back to Aichien, got back there in time for dinner. And just before dinner, I think it was. So I got to rework on continue working on a tree that was in front of me at that time. It was a beautiful old Japanese white pine that I was styling and wiring and that sort of stuff. So went from doing all this carting and carrying and packing and sorting and standing around waiting to be told what to do to getting back to working on the trees, and then got to discuss things like field growing with the people at the nursery and start to really dig deep on a few different things. And then we get into having dinner, and everyone's calming down, everything's settling down, and the days look like it's sort of wrapping up. And we got told that we'd be leaving at 5 a.m. the following morning to head to Tokyo, which I thought, that sounds great. No problems at all. Go to bed early tonight, get up early tomorrow, in the car, off we go, all done, easy. So that was the plan. And then it all changed. We had a knock on the door at about 9 o'clock saying that we are leaving immediately to head to Daijuen, and we'll be staying there the night, so pack an overnight bag. It's like, okay, let's go. So threw a couple of things into a bag, and we were getting told, come on, quick. So we had to jump into the vans, and we tore over, left Aichien in Nagoya at 9:30 and tore over to Daijuen. And when we get there, the place was packed. The kitchen was loaded with people. There was bonsai professionals from all different nurseries that had come together, and we got told that we were all staying in one room in the house. So we got to sleep in one of the upstairs bedrooms at Dajuen, and there was just basically doonas on the ground, and that was it. And you had to find your spot, put your stuff down there, and we got told that's it, go to sleep. And I reckon there was at least 6 to 10 people in that room, all jammed in together side by side. And I remember thinking to myself, you've got to go to sleep quickly, because if the snoring breaks out here, there's no chance of any sleep whatsoever. But I was so excited. I looked around. I was pinching myself, thinking, look at where you are on day 6 of your trip to Japan. You're in a room full of some of the best professionals at bonsai in Japan that I'd ever known, and you're at the home of Pine Bonsai at Dajuen, and tomorrow you get to go to set up one of the best shows be part of the setup of one of the best shows in the world, and the stuff, it's like bonsai dreams are made of. And I remember trying to say to myself, just go to sleep, go to sleep. And I put my headphones in and put the music on gently, thinking, oh yeah, this'll help, and then started. Oh my God! It was like an orchestra of snoring. It broke out around the place, and I remember stuffing my arms over my ears, turning the music up really, really loud, and that's not conducive to trying to go to sleep in the first place. But it was just mental. The snoring just went on and on and on. It seemed to be that these Japanese bonsai professionals could go to sleep at the drop of a hat, and I was stuck there, just really, really tired, really wanting to go to sleep, but that was not going to happen. Then I'm just starting to doze. I don't know what time it was. It was really, really late, and then you hear these footsteps coming down the hallway. So I looked at my watch. It's like 1:30 in the morning. The door kicks open, and Mr. Suzuki, who's at the door, turns on the light and says, "Leaving now, immediately." So everybody flew out of bed. These guys woke up straight away. Out of dead sleep, snoring, woke up straight away. Everyone goes, right, that's it, let's go, pack your stuff. So all the little groups got together who was travelling together, and grabbed my bag, and we raced off downstairs. And the reason why we were going then was because the snow had started, which wasn't expected until the following morning, which is why I found out later on, that's why we'd gone to Dajuen to sort of get a bit of a head start in case this did happen. And it did. So we walked outside, and the snow was bucketing down. It was coming down pretty heavy. But they said, we've got to go now, otherwise there's a chance it's going to close off the motorway and we won't get through. So we jumped in, and I was in a mini mover. And I was with 2 other people in the van, myself and Mr. Tanaka, and no, 3 other people. 3 other people, Mr. Tanaka and myself. So it was compact, it was squishy, but we were going and we were driving, and I was amazed at how sort of quickly we got going. So wake up at 1:30 in the vans, by 2 we were on the road, and they planned to stop every 2 hours. So the convoy would sort of catch up. The slower cars would sort of catch up with the quicker cars. We'd meet at one of the truck stops along the way. We'd stop, have a bit of a break, get a drink, jump back in, off we'd go again, and it would rotate through drivers. So I didn't have to drive, but the apprentices all had their turn at driving for a sort of 2-hour blocks while everyone else tried to sleep. And one of the things back in at that time in Japan that was very big was smoking. And I remember being in this closed space, 2:00 in the morning, and the smoking starts, and the windows are kept up because it's cold outside, and the snow's coming down. And I remember sitting there with my eyes burning from cigarette smoke, thinking this is just not what would happen in Australia. But it was it all compounded to be part of the experience for me. And I got this really vivid memory, and I took a photo at the time looking from the centre back seat out the front windscreen, and you couldn't see anything. It was just snow coming down, the windscreen wipers going as fast as they could, and you could barely see the line markings on the road. and we were just flying off to Tokyo like a bat out of hell, just completely focused on achieving a target of getting there as quickly as we possibly could. So after stopping every 2 hours, next to zero sleep, being completely buggered, like knackered, completely knackered, we got there at about 8 o'clock in the morning, which I was surprised at. It was quite an efficient little trip, and everyone jumps out. We parked the cars at the Green Club, and we went for a walk around the corner, and then Mr. Suzuki bought everyone breakfast. So we had a nice noodle soup and some rice for breakfast, and then we went back to the Green Club, and the combined nurseries had been allocated or purchased a stall area in one spot. So then the setup began, and that's where the hierarchy of how things are done really came to the fore. That there's sort of layers of authority with things, and obviously I was right down the very back, so you'd sort of be told to stand to the back, and then if someone needed you, you'd get, hey, can you pick up that and put it here, or can you go and do this, or can you go and see this person, or do this or do that. And setting up these tables, it was sort of like, it was squabbling, but it all came together, and then the final say from the chief comes through and goes, yep, perfect, that's what we want. And then the trees start coming in and they start getting put into place. And I even noticed that above the stand there was an air conditioning vent, or a heating vent that was sort of blowing hot air. So one of the jobs people had was to block off the vents so it didn't affect the trees. All little things, stuff that you'd sort of, you'd breeze over yourself. Seeing it at a professional level really changed. For me, it was just an eye-opening experience, and we got to hang around there doing the setup, which just took forever, just dragged on hour upon hour. And you look at it and think, if you're doing it yourself, it'd be a 10-minute job. A couple of tables, bit of tablecloth, a few stands, more cloth on top of those, done, set, ready to go. But it was such fine finessing and fine detail, and arguing to and fro which was right. And then the trees come in, it's like, no, that tree there, no, that tree over there, no, that's got to be in that corner, it's got to stand here, it's got to stand there. And I remember it was like setting up for a bonsai show to display your trees in a way that was best to help them be sold, which was the idea of the Green Club, is to sell. Nurseries go there to sell their wares, and hopefully make a bit of money on the way. So anyway, we got there at 8, and by the time setup happened, we left at about 11:30 for a quick bite to eat, and then we went off to Kokufu. We drove over to. It was in a different venue at that stage because the original hall where it was presented year on year was being renovated. So I remember there was a temporary thing that we had to go to a different location, and they were actually running. When it all got going, they were running buses between the Green Club and Kokufu to sort of ferry people backwards and forwards, which is not normally the case. So anyway, we drove over to the venue, parked, and then the setup for Kokufu started, which was just mind blowing. Seeing some of the best trees in a car park on trolleys getting wheeled in from all over Japan that had been specially selected to make the cut to get in there, and the stands themselves and the pots and everything just being absolutely perfect. It was right then that the penny dropped for me to think, when you think about bonsai shows, or when you think about your own trees that are going on display, that's the level of detail you should have, and that should be your ultimate goal, that you do the very best with the resources that you've got, and you prepare them thoroughly. You make sure, obviously no weeds, but you oil the pot to make that look absolutely perfect. The mossing on top of these things has got to be spot on. Every needle's got to be in the right spot on that tree. If anything's lacking, fix it before it gets put on display. And then the table, select the stand that's appropriate for the tree, and the accompaniment, whatever it is, stone, an accent, whatever, that's just as critical to it. And then when you put it on the table, it's not just slap it on the table. That was one thing that I really saw was, seeing the professionals put their tree on their stand back, have a look, and then a bit of a shuffle here and a shuffle there. And there was one point where I took a photo of the initial setup, and then I saw them stand back and they were shuffling things. So I raced in, took another photo, and then, I'm looking at it going, there's no difference. I don't see what you're doing, like that centimetre move this way or the centimetre that way, or this going across here, or that changing to this, or that stand being moved to whatever. But I kept taking photos along the sequence, and then they went, right, and they all stood back and went, that's it, perfect, done. And I remember looking back at the photos later on going, I remember the first one being really, really good. And I looked at the first and I went straight to the last and swapped between the two and went, I can see the difference. Like, there's a massive difference. It makes it look, it's the 1%ers, it's those little things that presented it even better than what it was originally. And that's where it's that elite level that really brings out the best. It's not being finicky, it's not being pedantic, it's presenting it the best possible way for the viewer that you possibly can to highlight or accent whatever it is that you're putting in front of that person at that particular time, which was amazing. And I remember walking around Kokufu. So once we'd carted in all the stuff, it was sort of like, okay, free time. We got given each of the apprentices got given this a ribbon, like a sort of small, imagine a best in show sort of ribbon. It's about the size of your fist, a round circle, red ribbon with red and white stripes sort of coming off down the bottom of it. And you had to pin it on. We got told you have to put it on because it shows that we're with the professionals, that we're not a professional, but we're with the professionals and we're entitled to be there because no one was around the place. And I was told that as part of being there and doing that, I was allowed to take photos, which back in those days, there was no photography whatsoever at the shows. It's different now with digital phones and stuff like that, but back then you weren't allowed cameras at all in there, so I got to take photos of every setup in there. And I remember being so excited, like as a kid in a candy store, going around seeing these amazing trees and just photographing them all with absolutely no one else in the whole aisle of these beautiful show. And I could focus in on the tables, I could focus on the pots, I could look at the structure of the trees, I could look at where they were wide, where they weren't wide, just the hows and whys. And I remember that being one of the most amazing learning curves that I've ever had, seeing it from that perspective. And then, I was a bit blown away. At one point, Mr. Kimura comes walking around the corner. It's like seeing a rock star. And then, 5 minutes later, Mr. Shinji Suzuki comes walking around another corner. And it's like, these are people I've only ever seen in magazines. Might have seen a few photos here and there on the internet back in those days, but really, it blew me away. Like just seeing these people, I'm getting that close to them. It was a real fanboy moment for me, seeing these people that you sort of idolise and read stories about, that they're right there, they're within reach of you as they walk past, and they smile and wave and whatever else. And I found out that Mr. Suzuki, he had 18 trees on show that year, and he was really pushing to take out top prize, and he did with a beautiful maple, and it was well worth it. But it was interesting to see that sort of people target different things with their trees that they use to present, and sometimes it's not necessarily about winning, but it's about representing. And anyway, it was certainly an incredible experience. So we headed back after that, after carting in to the Green Club, and I think we got back there at about 3 o'clock. Late, it was late in the day anyway. Getting on, I was thoroughly exhausted, and there wasn't much happening. It seemed to be more of a socialising thing between professionals. So you sort of got to stand back again and walk around the Green Club. Now, when you think of a bonsai sales area, for me back then, it was more about thinking about my local club where you'd sort of see a batch of trees, raw stock, that sort of thing for sale, a few pots here and there or whatever. The Green Club was just as good as the Kokufu setup, and the trees on display were like, they can't be for sale. That's like a winner. And then I got told, oh no, that one's actually won, that one's won before too, and that there's a notion that they become worth less once they've won Kokufu. They're actually worth more, the bonsai over there, when they haven't won one of the major prizes, because everyone's striving to achieve it with a tree that hasn't been possibly seen before or been displayed before in that environment. But then when they get there and they win, it's like, yeah, okay, now you've won, you can't win again, so move on. And that's where collectors will come around and they will acquire these trees and they'll go into private collections and they'll stay there forever and may get registered as an important tree. And it's just a completely different mindset from what I'd had up until that point. Walking around the different sales areas and getting to meet the vendors and say hello, and being from Australia, it was very different because there was no one there from Australia at that time, and the quality of the stock was like amazing, and the prices to go with it were, mind you, they were incredible as well. They were, some of them were through the roof. I'd never seen trees worth that much money before, actually for sale, and there was also a range of lower end stock, which I would have put in my pocket and brought home with me any day of the week, because it was exceptional in comparison to the stock that was available in my local area at that time, and the price that it was very, very affordable. So I was really super impressed with the Green Club, and actually thought that sort of drew more of my attention with all the bonsai knickknacks that were available that I'd never seen before, and stuff that you could buy and people you could meet. And anyway, so we left the Green Club set up just after 3 or something like that, and then zoomed back to Daishuan. Thank goodness the snow had stopped. Got to stop on the way back at one of the truck stops and saw an amazing view of Mount Fuji. That was remember that being, just getting out of the truck and everyone's just sort of like, yeah, whatever. And I looked and went, that's the first time that I've seen it that close. The very first time I saw it was on the plane on the way over, but that was the closest I'd seen it, sort of looking up at this beautiful mountain where it was clear and there was no cloud around it, and it was just right there. The truck stop was right beside it, so it was a real just one of those beautiful experiences that sort of compounded everything, where I'd be pinching myself going, how lucky are you? You're in Japan, you get to see all this stuff and experience it, and you get to see Mount Fuji. It's right there. It's, they reckon that if you see Mount Fuji, you're definitely coming back. Well, yeah, that happened a few times. So anyway, we flew back to did the drop off at Daishuan. What we had to, stopped inside for a nice hot cup of green tea. Everyone said thank you and farewells, and then we went back to Taichung and had I think we stopped on the way back there, and ultimately got home by about 10 o'clock, I think it was. I think we pulled in the yard at about 10, and it's probably the longest 2 days of my life. But seriously, every time my eyes would close, they'd pop open again and think, how about that tree? And I'd look at my camera and go through the photos and go, whoa, that was amazing. Geez, I hope one day I'll have a tree that good. And look at the branch structure on this one. And then I'd start to doze again, and I'd be like, remember that stand that was on that Hinoki cypress? Have a look at that again. And then I looked at the bag of goodies of stuff that I'd bought, tools that I'd bought at the Green Club. And anyway, it was just amazing. So I remember jumping in the shower at about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and just being absolutely zombified, just completely bloody exhausted. And we got told that, I think word got passed down the line that we're going to have a sleep in tomorrow. So the next day is going to be a late start. And I went, thank God, I haven't slept for 2 days. Like, what's a late start? And they said, breakfast at 8:30, start at 9. It's like, okay, I suppose that's better than 6 o'clock. Let's see how we go with that. But that was one of the most amazing experiences, and that driving, that whenever I think about that first time in Japan, or my favourite memories of going to learn and study in Japan and immerse myself in the culture, the vision that I have, the very first thing that pops in my head is that view from the back seat, tearing middle of the night on a freeway with the snow coming down, the windows up, the cigarette smoke lingering around the cabin of the car, people talking loudly in the middle of the night, and a windscreen wipers going flat out, trying to get rid of the snow off the front windscreen. Doesn't sound like much, but to me it just completely embodied the fact that I'd immersed myself completely in the experience, and that there was absolutely no way I was going to miss 1 second of this adventure or be held back from being part of it ever again. And that was when, like I said, it was the whole thing was a learning experience for me. And there was just, real big bombshells that went off everywhere around the way. But this one, seeing that setup and being involved at the start, I think walking through, I remember when a couple of days later I went back to the exhibition and got to walk through, got given a pass and got to go through as a true visitor. And, it was really nice walking through there, looking at going, I saw that one. I saw that one get set up. Yeah, I helped carry that one in. Yeah, I know whose tree that is, and that's whatever. And I saw that tree. I thought it was going to win, and it did win, and that's Mr. Suzuki's and whatever. And I remember being there by myself, and just walking through. And it was like being on a conveyor belt. If you imagine, there's just an absolute stream of people coming in there, and as you get to walk through, because you're sort of getting pressure from behind to keep walking because more people want to come through, and there's just so many trees in this display that as you start walking through, you sort of look at it and you've got a couple of seconds, 5-10 seconds maybe, before the person behind you sort of pressures forward and you've got to take a walk to the next tree. 5-10 seconds, pressure forward. And it was, look, I loved it. It was amazing. I thought it was, I remember at the time doing it and being on that conveyor and you get sort of, 50, 60 odd trees in, and I suddenly, a light bulb went off in my head going, how disrespectful is this? These, from myself, I don't mean that against the people sort of pressuring me to walk, but I felt disrespectful the way that I was looking at the trees. Like, these bonsai were some of the most amazing in the world, and people had put their life into them. Their generations had gone into these things to make them exactly what they were, to be on display in front of me right then and there. And I give it 10 seconds and then I'm on to the next tree. And it was like, that's not fair. That's totally not fair. And so that was one of the big things for me, was that I learned, which I still use to this day. Whenever a tree is presented to me in whatever fashion it is, whether it's I'm looking at someone's tree on display, and they know I'm looking or not, I don't care. But whenever I look at someone else's bonsai or pre-bonsai, or someone wants me to talk about, a whip, a seedling that's going to become a bonsai one day in the future, then I give it my absolute respect, because at that time I felt it almost ashamed. I'm not trying to dramatise it, not trying to blow it out of proportion, but I remember at the time going, "Wow, that's shocking." If I'd done that, if that was my bonsai and someone just went, "Yeah, it's nice," and moved on, you go, hang on a minute, that thing's been with me for 30 years. I've worked 30 years on this thing for such a long time to get it to this point that I could, in this very moment, put on display so you could give me your time and devotion to look at it. And, I talked about the fundamentals of design, the thought that goes into designing these bonsai, and then you give it 10 seconds, that's shocking. That's so rude. Well, that's how I felt about myself. So from then on, I would stop. And if someone wanted to go past, I would just take a step back into the middle of the aisle. And you can imagine a conveyor going one way and then coming back the other on the other side of the aisle. And I'd sort of step into the middle and I'd stay there and go, no, that tree deserves more of my time. And then I also got to appreciate so much more the fact that I was able to be there with nobody in the place and take photos and study and analyse and give my time and devotion to these trees when I was doing the setup. That was like, it became even more valuable to me, looking at it around the room going, if you'd paid to travel from Melbourne, Australia, where I am, to Japan, to come along to do Kokufu, and you came in as I did, and you were on the conveyor belt of looking at these trees, then you'd still love it. But I don't think, I'm certain that I wouldn't have got as much out of it. I would have looked at it and come home and gone, that's a brilliant show. Amazing trees, really, really nice. But, you couldn't take photos. Yeah, you couldn't stop and look at them. You had to keep moving. You couldn't analyse the trees. You couldn't study them. You couldn't, look up under the branch structure and see how things had been developed. And you couldn't look at the pots and take in all the grandeur of these things that are, possibly older than Australia. It's, the current settlement of Australia anyway. But, it's one of those things that just, was to me just really soak this up and absorb as much as you possibly can, because the chances of being ever able to do this ever again are so minute that it may never happen. So it was it was, I looked through my notes before I started this podcast, and one of the things I'd highlighted and circled was absolute madness, which it was, but it was so exciting that, sitting down with these people that, are some of the best bonsai people in the world, and just being in their presence and learning from them and seeing what they've done and how they do things and how they transport trees and all the stuff that you never get shown or never get taught, that you can sort of pick up only by being there in the moment. That was what I got to achieve. So anyway, that was a really special time for me, and I wanted to devote this whole podcast to it because it's only it's only a couple of days in the scheme of things, but it was transformative. It was incredible, and it's like a permanent scar, a bonsai scar on my persona. Well, that's it for this podcast. Thank you for sticking around. Hopefully, it was of interest to you. And there's not much. There's more learnings from the trip in Japan, which I'll nut out in the next few podcasts. But that was the most memorable part for it. There's lots of other things that I learned, techniques and strategies and all that sort of stuff, and lots of feel good moments, which I'll cover off sort of in future podcasts. But Thank you for sticking around. Really appreciate everyone that listens and contributes. And if you need to reach out to me, do it through the socials. Just search for Bonsai Matsu, and I will get in touch with you as soon as I possibly can. And I do appreciate it. It's so nice to know that there's a lot of happy people around the world enjoying bonsai, that they get as much out of it as what I do. So there's plenty more to come. So until next time, happy bonsai.